Greetings, members one and all of the Salivation Nation. Could this be the beginning of the reset of the dollar? That's the question we're asking today. As most of you know, I have been making some statements in recent weeks and even months about the potential or theory that perhaps the powers that be could be planning a reset of the dollar before a major crisis occurs. And basically, what it stems from is the meetings that have been occurring with the Federal Reserve, and specifically in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. But nonetheless, there's some things going on in the world today, and especially in the United States, the amount of change that could lead us to believe that there could be a revaluation or a reset, maybe that's a more correct term, a reset of the dollar. And to sort of back up this claim, something happened last night that I watched and really didn't pay that much of attention to because it was something that's been said for quite some time in campaigning. Donald Trump held a rally in Rochester, Minnesota. And in that rally, he talked about, the United States pays for a lot of different things. And some of those things that they pay for in other countries and for other nations' defense, some of them are under agreements that stem back from the time of World War II. And there's something surprising that he said that just kind of flew over the radar. And it wasn't until One Small Gold had posted a video today entitled that Trump has begun the end of the petrodollar. And then it got me thinking. I watched his live stream about that, and it was quite fascinating indeed. And that got me back to thinking about my original theory that we could be seeing the beginning stages of the reset of the dollar. And let me explain a little bit. But before I do so, I want to encourage you guys to check out Small Gold's video about this because he's going to give you some background information leading up to the petrodollar, which is the system that we use today. And it's thanks to Henry Kissinger in 1973 that essentially saved the dollar when it was that was the currency from which oil would be traded from the largest oil producer in the world at the time, Saudi Arabia. But Small Gold goes into great depth and detail explaining how we got to the petrodollar, the things that led up to it, and what has happened to the dollar and what has happened to oil and oil-producing nations after the petrodollar in 1973 up to the financial crisis and what led to the faith and the credit of the dollar since then, especially after the financial crisis of 2007, 2008. And this could be the beginning. Now, it may not be, this one thing may not have totally have triggered it, but when Donald Trump made his speech, he talked about meeting with the king of Saudi Arabia and asking him, hey, can you pitch in a couple of bucks towards the defense of your nation? And the king just said, well, hey, why don't you? And he says, well, nobody's ever asked. Well, he's asking now, and he was serious. And it was quite fascinating, quite an interesting exchange. And really, probably the king could have snapped back and said, well, you're under contractual agreement based on the petrodollar situation to provide for our defense as long as we provide oil in exchange for dollars. But nonetheless, it sounds like that even as so, and as Small Gold pointed out, there may not be a reason to have the petrodollar anymore because the cleanest shirt in a pile of dirty laundry, as a subscriber, a commenter had posted in a prior video, is better than the other dirty shirts, but still it's a dirty shirt, and that's the dollar. The dollar is in trouble. We're printing these things like it's going out of style. And in fact, I somewhat disagree with Small Gold as far as the quantitative tightening that's going on. The Federal Reserve is still printing these dollars like it's going out of style. They're just not doing it as much. I kind of liken it to baseline budgeting, with in terms of Washington spending. We're still spending a lot. We're still going into debt. And I know the two aren't mutually exclusive. But nonetheless, just because you spend a little less, you're still spending a lot more than you should. Same thing with the amount of C notes that are being printed and digitized by the Federal Reserve. But nonetheless, that's kind of a moot point because the dollar, in a sense, is the strongest currency out there. And everybody knows it, from China to Turkey to Spain, Italy, Saudi Arabia. And so we really don't need the petro backing anymore, because by default, essentially everybody's using that anyway, and using the dollar because it's the strongest currency. There is one small caveat that we have to think about, and that is the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, and that is the World Bank, and the meetings that they held, is could there be a possibility that the BRICS nations or some of these other emerging economies could band together against the U.S. dollar? I guess that's a possibility. Probably less likely nowadays. As Small Gold pointed out, there's a lot of other nations that are still pumping out their currencies just because it's fiat. Where the fiat designation means something, but it also unhinges it. It frees the government, the banks, to just continue to just do their free will, because it's not backed by anything. This is just paper, but it is paper that is recognized, legal tender for all debts, public and private. We use this dollar to get these for us, so we need it. We need it to get not only gold and silver, but also food, to pay our bills, to pay our mortgages. It's there. So the dollar is something to consider. Now, with that being said, knowing that we're the biggest kid on the block, so to speak, we're the king of the hill. It's not a very big hill to be on, and it's still delicate. Who knows what's going to happen? So my guess is they're probably working something out, and it may be, we've had Bretton Woods, we've had Jekyll Island. Maybe the next one will be Jackson Hole, Wyoming, where they will discuss and try to plan out a new dollar that may not necessarily be revalued, but bolstered in such a way to provide faith into it. Maybe even a rules-backed monetary system, and which is actually has been proposed before by a presidential candidate, Ted Cruz, in the 2016 election, and maybe it's something to consider, where maybe gold and silver could perhaps be a part of a rules-backed monetary system to provide some kind of control of the dollar, that so politicians or banksters or anybody just can't take off with it and just print these things without some sort of checks and balances. We need checks and balances on the dollar, and maybe that process is underway, because just like as what happened in 2007, 2008. In that financial crisis, there could be another one that could come along. And it may not be as bad, or it could be worse. Don't discount the possibility that we could see a minor depression come along. It's just because we're the best of the worst that are out there around the world does not mean that it's infallible. Too big to fail. We know where that took us last time. The dollar, though it's the best of the worst, it is not too big to fail. And that's something we have to think about and be disciplined as they come together. Now, and it could be that if there is a reset of this dollar, or some way to set it up so that it provides for a better faith for not only U.S. citizens, but for people around the world, if that can somehow be set in stone, then it could possibly save us from the time when a bigger collapse or economic crisis occurs, to help protect us. The other side of that coin, pun intended, is that they may make things worse. They may kick the can down the road even further next time. And then that's a real problem. We'll see how it plays out, but we could possibly be hearing some news, or maybe it might be a while. Maybe this will happen completely under the radar. Stay tuned. Nonetheless, no matter what they do, nothing will compete with the stability of precious metals, gold and silver. Continue to accumulate, stack on, collect as you can afford. I'd like to extend a multitude of gratitude to y'all for watching and encourage you to please rate, comment, and subscribe.